City Council as decision makers on new development for annexations and zoning map changes. It determines the Planning Department's work program as we bring that to you, to the Joint City-County Planning Committee each year. It can also guide the programs, plans, and actions by other city and county departments and organizations in Durham. So while the plan's greatest impact is really on land use and how we direct and manage growth in our community, it's also an opportunity to commit to and daylight the things that are priorities to our residents. Some of those are less directly connected to land use, but that land use can definitely impact. For this plan, we've used the Triangle J Council of Governments 2050 population estimate of 130,000 additional people in Durham County. This means that we need to accommodate approximately 60,000 new housing units before that time frame. This plan is a unique opportunity for us in that it is a city and county document. It's an opportunity for a shared vision between our two jurisdictions to look at addressing the needs and priorities of Durham residents and as you all as our elected officials together. And while many operations are split between the city and county, with this plan and as a joint department, we can look at the whole picture. So this slide lists the main components of the new plan. We're going to talk briefly about each of those just as a background, but generally the kind of what and why of what we're doing is in the goals and objectives. The where is in the place types and the place type map. And the how is in policies and implementation. So with the goal of developing these components, we wanted to start off the project with a clear community vision of how Durham should look in the future. That work began back in November of 2019, quite some time ago. And just a quick overview of timeline you can see here with our plan to begin the adoption process for the plan this winter. So to lay the foundation of the comprehensive plan and to develop our goals and objectives, we started with open-ended engagement with residents that allowed them to describe to us what they wanted their Durham community to look like in the future. As we started that work, both the county and the city were looking at how to work towards more equitable engagement. We've been learning quite a lot about how to do that work better through this process, ensuring that we are putting resources towards trying to reach residents who we have not reached in the past, as well as working toward improving communication engagement with the full community. So as we all are aware, after that first phase of our engagement was when COVID really hit our community. We have been continuing to work to develop equitable engagement strategies through the pandemic. It has taken more time and is more challenging for us, but obviously much more so for our residents. And so this is just something that we have worked through together to try and find ways to still reach folks during challenging times. One of the ways that we've done that is to ensure we have an iterative feedback loop where each time we're talking with residents and throughout the process, we're asking folks how are the strategies that we're using working and trying to make changes and improvements as we go along. This slide kind of shows a general engagement approach kind of post-COVID or during COVID and now. Essentially, we've worked to incorporate different staff and resident perspectives into the work of creating and refining drafts of the different plan components, as opposed to developing them in isolation by our team, which has certainly been common practice in our profession and in our department's history. We've worked with interested residents to create an outreach team who've provided guidance to us along the way, to work with an engagement ambassador network of residents connected to folks in our community who are often left out of government decisions, and to bring staff and residents together to learn from each other's experience in creating drafts of work. So the first part, the first component of the plan was developing the goals and objectives. This was really focused on hearing from residents to develop a vision for the plan, These goals and objectives were adopted by this board and the City Council in June of last year. In addition to the goals and objectives, it included guiding values, which were things that we heard from residents were priority in how our local governments work with residents. Those values are equity, accountability, accessibility, and resident well-being. We have 9 big picture goals and objectives, 9 big picture goals with 33 objectives. The 9 goals are around sense of place, community relationships, housing and neighborhoods, transportation, environment, jobs and training, public spaces and recreation, education, and health and well-being. These goals and the subsequent objectives reflect what we heard were important needs and priorities to residents. Some of those topics are very directly related to land use, with clear action items for the planning department to work towards implementation. Some of them have less direct connection to land use and will require us working together across departments and community organizations and institutions to work towards. The next component is the place type map. So this is essentially where we're applying our vision in the goals and objectives geographically. The map shows a place type for every single parcel in Durham and replaces our existing future land use map. The map is not legally binding and it does not change the property owner's rights under the existing zoning. It does show where our community wants to develop different things like houses, stores, businesses, schools, where to protect farmland and green space, and how all of these different uses should work together. In developing this new map, we looked at a lot of different data, including the goals and objectives, the existing land uses in the community, where environmentally sensitive lands and transportation networks exist, our current and future ability to serve parts of our community with various types of infrastructure. These were all considered as we looked at applying the vision geographically. So accompanying the map is the place type guide, which is a key or a legend for understanding the place type map. It includes 20 different place types. Some of these describe places that exist in our community that are unlikely to change significantly in the next 20 or so years. Some examples of this include the rural and agricultural preserve or established residential place types. Other place types are places that may not really exist in our community now that we want to see in the future. And these were directly informed by the vision that we heard from residents in developing the goals and objectives. Some examples of new places that we want to plan for are mixed residential neighborhoods, transit opportunities, and mixed-use neighborhoods. These areas envision a more diverse mix of housing, transportation options, and commercial uses in one area within the existing footprint, the city footprint. Each one of the place types describes the character of the place we'd like to see, rather than just use and density, which our current future land use map includes. The character descriptions in the place type guide include different uses that should be part of each place type, how people will move around that place or to surrounding areas, what types of natural or green spaces should be included, and how we expect to serve that place type with infrastructure. A draft map and guide were first shared with the community during the fall and winter of last year and in January of this year. They're both being revised now in response to the input received. The policies as a component of the comprehensive plan are written recommendations, again guiding us towards our community's vision of adopted in the community goals and objectives. In their final form, the policies will also include action items that identify steps to work towards making these policies happen. 227 draft policies were developed by teams of staff and residents during August 2021 through March of this year. They were shared with residents in the spring and summer of this year, and we are also working on revisions to those now. The final piece of the plan is the implementation framework. So we need to have a strategy for implementation. We want to get going on making this vision a reality as quickly as possible as the plan is getting adopted. So this is going to build on the actions that are working towards policy implementation, and will include information on who needs to be involved with or who is responsible for various pieces of work. Some examples of implementation could include revisions to our Unified Development Ordinance, regulations for development, could include creating new zoning districts to reflect the kind of places described in the place type guide. It could include selective rezoning to better match place types, changes to city or county policies and procedures, or identify additional long-range planning studies that are needed to supplement. And once we begin implementation, we'll also be putting together a report card. It's basically intended to show how are we doing at meeting or working towards the goals and objectives and guiding values that are adopted. So that is the background for this, and I want to jump into some of the main ideas that are in the new plan. In particular, we want to note in some places differences to the approach to growth management from the 2005 comprehensive plan and this new plan. While some of those ideas may have greater impact on areas within the city and others on areas outside the city limits and in the county, all of these ideas work towards a vision for our community that we believe accommodates the needs of both our city and county residents. So the first item is the use of urban growth boundary and future growth areas to reduce sprawl and to protect rural lands. This is an area where we can highlight change from the 2005 comprehensive plan. That plan extended the suburban tier, which is the edge of where the city is envisioned to grow, out to the edge of our critical watersheds, including out to the Wake County line in southeast Durham. This guided the decision by the county and the city to invest in infrastructure to serve this future growth. That prior adopted policy direction is creating the ability and the demand for development in the area we refer to as Southeast Durham, where development pressure is causing concern from residents currently. In the proposed new plan, the urban growth boundary replaces the current suburban tier, the line beyond which the city's not envisioned to expand. And that proposed urban growth boundary has been retracted by about 13 square miles from where the suburban tier boundary was drawn. That's working to protect more of the county rural areas and environmental lands and water supply. Future growth areas are another tool that we're using in this plan. These are areas that are located within the urban growth boundary, but they're places where we believe development should not yet happen. These areas require infrastructure investment, whether that's extension of water and sewer or creation of a new fire station to meet response time requirements. Essentially, these are areas where we're saying we need to plan for and begin developing infrastructure before development should happen in these places. On the map, you'll see the future growth areas do have place types designated, and the idea is that once the infrastructure is in place, those place types are what we envision to be in those locations. And then it would stop being a future growth area. Another thing that we've done is establish a transit opportunity area place type. Those have been plotted out along existing and planned bus routes to add more housing and access to transit within the city. Our previous plan really aligned land use with transportation mainly around the former planned light rail alignment in the form of large compact neighborhood tiers. This plan includes smaller scale transit opportunity areas where high frequency public transit stops exist or are planned. These areas are generally placed at intersections of streets and in places where older shopping centers provide an opportunity to redevelop to become places that better serve residents, no matter their transportation mode. We've also established a new mixed residential place type that can be used on greenfield sites within the urban growth boundary, which would include a mix of different types of housing. This place type generally applied on undeveloped land that's within the urban growth boundary. It includes multiple types of housing, could be townhouses, detached single-family apartments, all mixed together in one development. And this is something that we heard through the goals and objectives. This is in contrast to historical patterns of development that have been largely single-family only, pushing out into the county. We've also established new neighborhood services and mixed-use neighborhood place types. These are places, and also in limited instances, rural commercial, in order to increase access to the things that residents need. This is another thing we heard really clear from residents. The neighborhood services place type identifies opportunities for neighborhood serving commercial and retail uses on small sites near neighborhoods. We need more of this within the city, but I've also heard that we need this access in a limited capacity in the county as long as it retains rural character. In addition, Trayburn and RTP are both designated as employment campus place types. This place type is envisioned to encourage a more diverse mix of uses, including housing and small-scale commercial, again, to allow access for residents to daily needs. And we believe this aligns well with the vision that RTP and RTF shared with their vision, and we're continuing to be in discussion with them around how to ensure there's alignment. The mixed-use neighborhood is generally placed on the map where new complete neighborhoods can be built that would include housing, shops, schools, daycare, that can be built to incorporate all the things that residents need. So these would be larger greenfield areas and would provide multiple transportation options to residents. And finally, the established residential place types are developed that could allow context-sensitive infill and a mix of housing types within neighborhoods that already exist, primarily within the city. These are where we don't anticipate seeing drastic change, but where we do want to make sure that we are allowing more residents to live within existing neighborhoods, connected to both transportation options and the jobs and services that are needed. These are places where we anticipate allowing infill at slightly higher densities to help us focus housing within our existing footprint rather than continuing outward sprawl. And then we know that the way that these places are incorporated into neighborhoods will have to be done sensitively and needs to focus on greater access to housing for our residents who need it most. And we have policies and action items that get at that issue. So this last example hits at the interconnectedness of the place type map and guide with the policies. So I want to share just a few key ideas in the policies. Again, we want to focus, the map key ideas got at this a bit, but we want to focus more growth within our existing city footprint. The vision adopted in the last plan resulted in extending infrastructure further out, expanding the city limits. The proposed policies guide us to make better use of existing infrastructure, channeling development into places in the community that have infrastructure in place to serve it, encouraging context-sensitive infill development, and discouraging consistent expansion outwards. We want to protect the rural and natural character of Durham County and to protect environmental lands. Developing outwards obviously brings impacts to sensitive natural areas, particularly near Falls Lake. We have policy language tied to the urban growth boundary that was described earlier. So the policies and the map are working together around that concept. We believe as long as we're doing this intentionally and sensitively, that this serves the needs and priorities of both our rural and our city residents, which we know is a tough balance to strike. The policies also work towards coordinating development and infrastructure better. We take a broad view of infrastructure in this work. It not only includes essential services like water, sewer, police, EMS, fire. It also includes policies around libraries, schools, broadband access, childcare. So a lot of the themes we've heard come up in earlier items today are discussed in the policies. We also have policy around not just where infrastructure is extended, but around improving the existing infrastructure in neighborhoods where it's currently insufficient for the development that we're seeing happening. One thing that we want to emphasize is that we're not just focused on how to do more equitable engagement, but we also want to work towards equitable outcomes with this plan. These policies are written in a way to benefit all Durham residents. We recognize the need to prioritize and support our most vulnerable residents because of the legacy of inequity in policymaking and land use decisions. We want to work towards ensuring that unintended consequences are avoided, which we know is really challenging in our work in bringing residents into the work to develop the policies is essential to working towards that. We have, as just for an example of how we've looked at equity in the policies, we have housing policies that not only encourage the types of housing in neighborhoods that we want to see and housing that's affordable, but housing that is affordable to folks with the lowest incomes and the greatest needs so that folks aren't being left out as our community grows and changes. And another example is working towards ensuring communication approaches for engaging residents on planning matters that are accessible to all residents, particularly those with limited internet access or language barriers or visual or other disabilities. Several of the place types I mentioned and the key ideas in the map talk about providing residents with better access to their daily needs. This is very much tied up with needs around transportation. And so we have worked with developing specific place types that incorporate different needs into one area, but also looked at how we can place different place types on the map to ensure that there are uses that are not too far from your neighborhood where you can get at those things that you need. Try and run through this a little bit more quickly. The final few items, we know it's important to you all to look at how we coordinate transportation investments and housing placement. This policy is really tied to the map and the guide and where the transit opportunity areas are mapped out along transit routes. And we also have policies around prioritizing low-cost housing along those transit routes so that residents have good transportation options, and that helps with affordability. We heard you'll talk about not having a solely car-centric vision, as we heard about RTP earlier. So working towards a network, a complete network where residents can safely move throughout our community regardless of age or ability or type of transportation. We know we have been an auto-centric community, and we have heard a clear call to move away from prioritizing movement by vehicles primarily and towards movement of people, giving priority to more vulnerable users, whatever their mode of travel is. We're all aware, and this has come up a lot today already, the need for affordable housing, and again, prioritizing access to those who have the lowest incomes and the greatest need. And finally, another thing that we heard you all talk about earlier is around community resiliency and sustainability. There's a few different policies related to this, or there's many, but a few highlights. A goal to conserve 30% of the land area of Durham in permanent conservation. Policies around clean air and water and access to natural and green spaces for residents, both for their environmental benefits and the health benefits to residents. A policy to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. To prepare people and infrastructure for disasters like extreme heat and flooding or pandemic, with particular focus on residents who will be the most impacted by unpredictable disruptions. Some of the ways that we can do that are investing in stable, secure, and affordable housing, multimodal transportation options, diverse jobs and pathways, and strong community networks that support and care for residents. And finally, we have policies around remediating environmental racism from things like highways, industrial uses, incinerators, and landfills. So we have two examples to close this out, just to show how some of the policies and the map and guide work together. The first is one that would be located within the city, and the second is in the county, just to kind of show two different characters. So the first example is near Durham Regional, Duke Regional, around North Roxborough and Carver Streets. It is one of the proposed transit opportunity areas shown in purple on the map here. It's an area that's served by multiple Go Durham routes and has additional transit service proposed in the new county transit plan. It's mostly developed already. It has some suburban style office and commercial and a lot of surface parking. This place type would allow us to add housing close to jobs with access to transit with city services and infrastructure already in place. It's an opportunity to improve access to housing, ensure there's non-residential uses that are providing access to the things that residents need, an opportunity to retrofit green infrastructure and create improved mobility, especially for those not driving. Our second example is in the Southeast Durham area, and as you all know, is experiencing rapid residential growth. As you might remember from the focus area on this Southeast Durham that we did last year. So this is an area that is within the proposed urban growth boundary. It is planned to be served by the Southeast Regional Lift Station that the city recently constructed. The area to the east of Kemp Road and Virgil Road is designated as a future growth area in the draft plan. Oh, yes. Yeah. Does this have a pointer? Oh, yeah. Okay. So the red line, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. The red line is the edge of the future growth area. The black line is the urban growth boundary. So you'll see the black line continues beyond to the north and the south here. The edge of the color is the edge of Durham County. The different colors on the map are indicating different place types. The hatched area is within the urban growth boundary and is a future growth area, saying we're not ready to develop here yet because we don't have the infrastructure in place, but it can be developed once the infrastructure is in place.
And just to clarify, what you're saying is those are areas that will be annexed into the city or can be annexed that are part of the county right now. I think it's really important to be very clear about what that means.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
So, is that the end of your...
Almost. Apologies. So this area could be served by city sewer. It's currently outside of the minimum response time by the nearest city fire station, though. So that means that development should not occur until a future new fire station is funded. This could be developed as another joint EMS facility, and that's something that we would want to hear from the county commissioners around. This is a place that we envision to be developed once the infrastructure is in place, with a variety of place types, including mixed residential, mixed-use neighborhood, established residential, neighborhood services, and recreation and open space. So with that, we just wanted to share what's next for the plan, and then we'd be happy to answer questions or hear thoughts from you all. We're currently working to revise the draft policies, the map, and the guide, and to develop the implementation framework. Once all of those different plan pieces have been drafted and revised, we'll be pulling them together in a full plan that we'll share with the community one more time before the public hearing and adoption process begins for the new plan, which we anticipate this winter. So with that, we just wanted to come back to the staff recommendation slide. We would really love your feedback and guidance, and we want to make sure that as we're revising the plan pieces and pulling together the full plan, we know whether we're on the right track from the perspective that you, our decision makers, have. And if there are concerns with the direction, things that you feel are missing or misprioritized, we want to hear from you now so that we can work to address those issues before the full plan is shared with the community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. A lot of information. So thank you for the presentation, commissioners. We had 30 minutes for this item, so that has already been expended. So let's take about 10 to 15 minutes so you have ask questions, get clarification, and finish this one up by 12:15. Can we do that? So, questions, commissioners? Commissioner Burns.
So first off and foremost, thank you. Thank you all for coming in. I'm happy that you introduced everybody because along with some of my colleagues do sit on Joint City County planning. So we do get this information a little bit more. I want to also say thank you. I raised a concern at one of our previous meetings after looking at the engagement strategy, and I felt like more could have been done in some of the less city-centric areas, i.e. RTP, Trayburn, Bahama, and Rougemont. And within 2 weeks, there was a turnaround, and we had a meeting done. That being said, everything that I saw here, I like it. I like the work that was put into it. I will say that after that meeting, and y'all saw, I was up there. It's about 200 folks up there. But we had individuals to come to that meeting at the Ruleton Club who were actually from RTP. So, and I ended up staying there for about 3 hours. I had other meetings I had to push back, and they drove as far as RTP to Bahama because they said they didn't know about some of the meetings. That in no way is a criticism or critique on your outreach strategy because I know how much y'all do. So let me just say that. But when I got outside, it was like, well, where is our meeting? And where is our meeting? And so I do think for a very long time, it was very city-centered, upper middle class. Then, a strategy was put in place. I like the way you said it. We were working on equitable engagement so that we could get equitable outcomes, right? So you all have been really intentional in that. And so it was really focused on folks who look like me. And let me be clear, I appreciate that as somebody who's lived in like every corner of Durham and didn't always know about these opportunities to speak up. But we went to that space, and I feel like we went there in medias res. We went there in the middle of action because we were closing out this project, and there were people there who, rightfully so, didn't feel like they knew anything about it at all, and they didn't feel like a survey was sufficient to get their thoughts, their feelings about their home and where their children live in that amount of time. So that next week, y'all saw we got some emails which spanned the spectrum. Some people said, yes, we need to extend this survey. Then there were other people that said, do not come up here. We all know that Durham is a very long, skinny county, right? You talk about the last map you showed us about how we might have to extend EMS. Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs, for pointing out that what these lines meant. Because I'll be honest, people did not know what the red. I knew what the black line meant, but we need to know what the red line meant. I think my only concern is, and this is just not for you, it's for everybody. Durham is going to start growing out. It just is. It's going to start going this way to south. It's going to start going this way north. And then the other thing that we're going to have to struggle with, we're going to have a lot of high rises. And so we have people saying the same thing. I'll go back to something that one gentleman said. He just, and I promise you I'm not rambling. I'm trying to protect the privacy of, the individuals that bought some of these things up. He didn't understand why we wanted to put, only a few houses or a bunch of houses on a certain amount of acres. And then you go into another room in the city and somebody says, well, we want to do this so we can do additional dwelling spaces. We want to do this so that we can work on affordable housing. But it doesn't make sense to somebody who lives in another part of the county. And so I'm not putting that ownership on you all to always be the individuals that have to do that kind of explaining, but I'm asking everybody in here, like, we have to do it, right? Like, if I go into my community, folks are not thinking about an additional dwelling space. Nobody cares about a she shed or a grandma suite in the back. They're thinking about, where am I going to have a place to live? I will never forget, one man actually stood up, good gracious, threw me completely off. He said, I don't want people in McDougal Terrace up here. That was an exact quote in that room, an exact quote, and they videotaped it. And I was blown away, but he honestly thought that that's what it was when he read the policy. And they printed some things out. We didn't have handouts for them. We didn't have maps for them. So as great as all of this is, in these next steps, after you all get done with the full draft and we open it up for public comment, what I fear is that we will have people who are still behind the 8 ball making public comment. And so what are we prepared to do as a board, as a city council, as a city county planning board, and your staff, to make sure that we don't run into that same roadblock that we ran into in Bahama, because that was a real concern for me. I've tried to visit families since then, but I don't want to hit them in medias res where we're like, well, we at 80% and we didn't even talk to y'all for 20, 40, or 60 of it. Now we have a draft plan together, and they still have concerns that probably should have been brought up back here. So I don't know what best ways, how we can be more supportive to families all over Durham. But I want to know how I can help in that endeavor, because I don't want to do like, this is year 3, it's your fault, because it's not. But whatever steps we need to take, I want to work with you all to figure out what those are so that we don't have that, because I can just envision what that public comment period is going to be like, and I'm actually really fearful, not for safety. I just don't want
Commissioner
people
Burns?
left behind.
Commissioner Burns, can I interrupt just a second, please?
I'm done, no, so you won't interrupt. You can just talk. I'm finished.
Thank you. Just for time's sake, is this the only time that there's going to be input from us for this? Because this is a lot of information, and commissioners need to have time to be able to give input here, and we are vastly approaching time. We're going to have to cut it off. So is this the only time that we will have an opportunity to weigh in on this plan? Because it's...
And I will say we can certainly get with staff and identify a time for them to come back and allow you time to kind of digest what you've heard and formulate other questions. We can do that.
That would be great, because it's a lot of information, and commissioners need to be able to weigh in, because otherwise our time is going to be gone.
If I could add just 2 things. We do invite all of you to come to the Joint City-County Planning Committee meetings and be part of the discussion there. We'll continue to share those with you. They happen every other month, where we're sharing a regular update, and it's usually a little bit more digestible because it's every 2 months. We also are planning to come back to you all with another presentation before the full plan, or as the full plan is getting ready to be put out for community engagement again. So I just wanted to mention those 2 things in addition.
Yeah, that's good, because we all have some concerns about our unincorporated areas and need to be able to have those conversations, and we don't have time to do that today. So if we've got some quick questions that we can get through today and then have another opportunity, I think that, if that's okay with the board.
Thank you. Yeah, I have some specific feedback related to the questions that you asked us. I think, first of all, we need to have, related to outreach, and I'm concerned that I think the timeline is not necessarily what we can see, but I think the problem is that one of the problems is that the online future place type map, it's very, very difficult to navigate that. It's very difficult to use, and I've heard a lot of concerns We're talking about access and availability, and that's an issue. Sometimes I think we get so far away from paper now, and sometimes paper is good. And so what I would ask is that we look at printing out. We used to do the big maps, and because of COVID, we haven't had in-person events. But I think we really need to focus on having some in-person events with pieces of the future place type map laid out with identifiable features on it, names of roads, things where people can see where they live. When you just have a map with colors on it, people don't know what they're looking at. So we need to have maps that people can understand, where they can give actual input, find where they live, and see how they're being impacted with the keys of the colors to understand. So that's one. I have my own maps from my old days on the Planning Commission that you rolled up, big maps that you can look at and touch. And so and we used to do events like that, in the Armory. So that's one recommendation. I'm concerned about this idea of the urban growth area. Somehow, there are a number of policies that you reference in here about how is that going to be enforceable? And I think we need to have a conversation about that, because the idea that we're going to stop the sprawl and we're going to protect our watershed, this is what people are concerned about. And we need to have a real conversation about that, because if people are just going to keep developers are just going to be coming forward with rezonings, then it doesn't mean anything. So we have to have a real conversation about the urban growth area. I would also like to understand how many more acres, how much more land is being added to the future growth area with this plan. That's important for people to understand. Related to the policies, and I've read them now several times, I really like a lot of your basic principles there. One thing that I didn't see a mention of the word rapid transit, didn't see anything about refugees and immigrants, nothing about child care, which we've been talking about today. And one guiding principle that I don't see is that looking at publicly owned land, publicly controlled land, and how that is redeveloped for public interest. For instance, school sites that are no longer used for schools. That's happening right now with Northern High School, DSA, 17 acres downtown. That has to be a guiding principle. That land that is not being used for their initial function, that needs to be used for affordable housing and other things like that. So that's one thing that I saw missing. And then housing types, I didn't see anything like looking at things like co-housing, really promoting conservation subdivisions, or even efficiency apartments. There's a lot of conversation now in housing about how we've gotten away from things that we used to have a lot of. Even what we see in dorms where there's rooms and shared suites. So even expanding, looking at the type of housing types. And then I guess my last comment is that I wonder if you all have looked at things like, because some of these things are just, if we just had basic principles like people are going to live in walkable everything is going to be walkable, and there are going to be street trees everywhere, everything's going to be resilient, we would cover a lot of these things. I wonder if you looked at this idea of a checklist, and I love the 15-minute neighborhood for developers, where with every development, is it walkable? Are there street trees? Can people get access to food and child care? Access to transit, schools? And are they resilient? Like, I don't know if you've thought about that. Just a basic checklist that people would have to look
I'm
at.
sure Mr. Jacobs going to have some more that she's going to email you about. So thanks, Commissioner Jacobs. Over on this side.
I'll just, at a really high level, say that I think that you all are moving in the right direction, and your focus on equitable engagement has been excellent. We can always do better, and you always say that. You always say you're working to do better. Really appreciate that. From the Farmland Board, I have heard some concern about sprawl into areas that we need to protect. So just whatever, we can do, like Wendy gave you some very specific ideas, but, how to prevent sprawl, right? We know we don't want to do that. We know we don't want all just in strict neighborhoods. I like what I've seen so far, and we'll learn more as an individual commissioner and can perhaps give you some more specific feedback at another time.
Commissioner Long? Have anything right now? So you've heard a lot of the concerns, and the manager has indicated that we will have another opportunity to weigh in on this. So I'm going to hold my questions for then, and think about the things that you've said and shown us today. But we appreciate the work that you're doing, but just know that we do have some concerns about the unincorporated areas and what's going on right now. And citizens are contacting us, and they are concerned. So thank you so much for your presentation today, and we will continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So commissioners, it's 12:15. We'll take about 20-minute lunch here, and then come back at the around 12:35 for the next presentation.
But like I said, I think there's so many other facets
item on our agenda is 220359, City-County Interlocal Agreement for Emergency Medical Technician Support of the Community Safety Department's Crisis Response Team Pilot. And let's see, who's here?
Commissioners,
Oh, there you are. Okay, cool.
Chair Howerton, Commissioners, if I may just quickly introduce, this is a proposed interlocal agreement with the City of Durham's Community Safety Department, and you had asked that you get a more comprehensive overview of the pilots that the department has started, and so you will receive a presentation from Ryan Smith and his team, and Bo Ferguson, Deputy City Manager, is here with us as well. Ryan will present. You have a chance to answer any questions, and then Mark Lockhart with the EMS chief is here as well to answer questions about the interlocal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to introduce yourselves. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Madam Manager. Ryan Smith, Director of the Community Safety Department, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. Good to see everyone. I'm Bo Ferguson, Deputy City Manager for the City of Durham over the public safety portfolio.
Welcome. Okay.
Good afternoon, Abena Bediaco, Clinical Manager.
Which manager?
Clinical Manager with the Community Safety Department.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Anise Vance, the Assistant Director of the Community Safety Department.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair as well. Sorry, we went through introductions, but just so you know, I'm joined today by Deputy City Manager Bo Ferguson, Assistant Director Anise Vance, and our Clinical Manager Abena Bediaco. So thank you for the time to be here today to share a brief update on our department and the pilots that we have launched. I'll provide a brief overview of those pilots and then talk about the interlocal agreement. So our department, as you know, was created a little over a year ago as a priority by the city manager. It came into existence on July 1st a year ago. We spent much of the first year leading a collaborative, community-informed planning process to inform the look of our pilots that launched a month ago. Let me just touch briefly on what that first year involved and the work that went into planning our pilots. The work of planning the pilots really had four major components. The first is that it was a highly collaborative process, and I really want to stress that it wasn't just the work of my small department that led to the final design of these pilots. It involved a multi-agency planning team that we led that included representation from EMS, representation from police, fire, from emergency communications, from Durham County's 24/7 Recovery and Response Center, from other behavioral health providers and local schools of social work. That process involved meeting with those partners almost weekly during the fall and winter to develop the plans. We are certainly very appreciative of the ongoing support we've had from Chief Lockhart, from Captain Helen Tripp over the Community Paramedicine Program, from Dr. Joyner and others who have participated throughout in these plans. It was also very much a community-informed process. So we held bilingual town halls, we held listening sessions in community and small workshops with residents to help inform this look, to understand their hopes for these new responses, what kinds of individuals they hoped in terms of training that they would bring, the kinds of response that they hope to see. All those things were built into it, and we have shared a lot of that, things that we have learned online, and would encourage you to, if you're interested, read that. We also have taken a very data-driven approach. The work of the department itself was formed off of a year-long study of 3 years of 911 calls. That initial study was really brought forward by our former city manager, Tom Bonfield, partnering with RTI to look at 3 years of call data to really understand why people call 911, what are the outcomes of those calls. It really laid the foundation for thinking about the variety of reasons people call 911 and what it would mean to provide additional types of responders to help best match the needs of persons in crisis. And we've continued to dive deeper into our data to understand a variety of factors around safety of those calls and other things that have helped inform which calls we have started with for various pilots. And then finally, we have learned from other cities. Some of the things that we are doing, we're one of the first to do in North Carolina, but we're not one of the first in the country. So we have learned from a bunch of other cities who are sending unarmed response teams now to calls and have been doing so for over a year. We've learned from cities that have been putting mental health professionals in their 911 call center. It is an exciting time in this country, and I think there is a great network and collaboration across the country of cities committed to learning together how to do this work well, and we've certainly benefited and taken full advantage of that. So we have 4 pilots, 3 that are currently in operation that we launched a month ago, and 1 that will launch later this summer. Those pilots all have at their heart one basic theme, which is connecting people in crisis to the right care by sending responses that best match their needs. And that means starting at the point of when people call 911 all the way through to trying to ensure a warm handoff to existing care providers. Our goal is not to serve as mental health providers. Our goal is to be part of a continuum of care to connect people to existing services that can best help meet their needs after a moment of crisis. I'll talk about each of these pilots briefly, and I'm going to spend the most time talking about the community responder team because this is the pilot that relates to the interlocal agreement. So first, let me talk about crisis call diversion. This has been in operation for a month. Crisis call diversion embeds licensed mental health professionals or clinicians into the 911 call center. Excuse me. Clinicians in the call center have multiple functions that they can play. They are capable of diverting calls from unnecessary in-person response. So individuals call 911 for a whole range of reasons. They don't all require an in-person response, and sometimes having a clinician available to speak with someone in crisis, to help understand their needs, to connect them to services, can avoid unnecessary in-person responses. But even when we have in-person responses, having clinicians in the call center can help us make more informed decisions, and importantly, when we're sending other first responders, to provide additional support and de-escalation prior to the arrival of first responders. We've had an opportunity to learn from the city of Austin, which has 18 clinicians working in their call center now, and they shared with us one example of the role this can play. They received a suicide threat with a person who had a gun in their possession. They dispatched, just like we did, law enforcement and EMS to that call, but the clinician was able to be on the phone with that person and to de-escalate the call and to get the person to put away their gun before other first responders arrived in a way that made that scene safer for everyone involved, including our responders and other people on the scene. And they credited the clinician in their call center as making that possible in a way that they did not think it would have been possible beforehand. So there's a lot of different benefits that can come from this, and we'll be learning over the course of this year the various ways in which clinicians can help support our entire public safety team. So our next one I'm going to spend the most time on, it's our community response teams. These are 3-person teams, unarmed teams of first responders that respond to nonviolent mental health crises and a number of other calls that are really about individuals who have unmet needs, who need support connecting to services. This has also been in operation for a month. Our 3-person team is designed to include a licensed clinician, a peer support specialist with lived experience of these types of crises, and also an EMT, an emergency medical technician. The goal of this program, again, is to send the right response and to really meet people in a moment of crisis where they're at and connect them to the services that they need and want. Right now, we're responding to a range of calls, including welfare checks, non-urgent welfare checks, trespass, which are really often just calls that involve persons who are unhoused or homeless, who may be sleeping in the doorways of businesses or need help connecting to other housing services. We're responding to calls for individuals who are intoxicated, individuals who may have suicidal ideation but do not have a weapon in their hand, a range of calls like that. Our teams, all of our teams, are fully integrated into our 911 system. And this is really important to us. It provides a lot of additional benefits. But our teams can get to calls 3 different ways. Because we're integrated into 911, our teams are dispatched just like any other first responder. They get into the office in the morning, they're in their vehicle, and they're in their vehicle for the full day in our service area, able to be dispatched directly from 911. They have computers in their vehicles, similar to what law enforcement and other responders have. They have police radios and are able to communicate with the emergency communication center. That integration is really crucial. That's one way that they get calls. They also have the ability to self-initiate calls. So if they're in the community and see someone who may be in assistance, they can radio 911 and take that call. And they'll also be able to receive referrals from other first responders. So if law enforcement arrives on the scene and thinks that this particular situation could benefit from having one of our community response teams come out and meet with the family or the individual in crisis, we can come that way too. And when we look at the city of Denver, which has been doing this for over a year, we see that those kind of three mechanisms for calls are each almost equally used, with 911 dispatch being the most common way that teams are receiving calls. I talked a little bit, this is a lot of text, and I'm not going to read it all, but I talked a little bit about taking time to listen to our residents. These are just some examples of quotes from listening sessions that we have held, where residents have talked about the kind of response that they hope to see, responses that are harm-reducing, that are accessible and inclusive, that are reliable and predictable, and that are familiar and empathetic. And we hold these as core values of ours that we aim to live into and aim to design responses that hold these values at their heart. And again, we have a report on our website that goes into further detail of a range of things that we have heard from our residents that we've tried to take into account. Our community response team does not operate currently citywide or 24/7. We're in a pilot period. We have staffing sufficient to evaluate these pilots, but not to operate at that level of scale. So over the course of this year, we'll be operating currently in 12 police beats. You see the map of that outlined here. Currently, we're operating Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. We'll be adding 2 more unarmed response teams over the summer, at which point we'll expand to coverage 7 days a week in our service area. We'll start at 8 a.m., and one of our teams will be available into the late evening hours. We'll be evaluating the pilot over the year, and then based on what we learn, we'll be able to go back and make recommendations about potential increases in staffing to support more services if the pilot supports that. Our teams are able to transport. I just want to touch on that briefly. The goal is our teams do not transport to the emergency room, but they will transport to other community-based facilities where individuals may want to connect to care. So, for example, we could transport individuals to the Recovery and Response Center. We take the training of our staff very seriously. One thing to note is that our individuals that we hire already come with experience in crisis response. Mental health clinicians have degrees in social work, have 1,000 hours plus of working under supervision. Peer support specialists are certified by the state of North Carolina. And of course, I don't need to speak about the EMT training, but we also provide extensive additional training. We have a 4-week intensive training that includes a range of safety and situational awareness training. You see a number of the trainings here that we include as part of that, including CIT training for our teams. And then we have a management team. Abena Bediako was one of those members. We have an additional clinical manager and an operations administrator. Between the 3 of them, they have over 50 years of experience doing crisis response work, and a majority of those years come right here in Durham, which we're proud of. I just wanted to touch, Abena's here, and she's wearing her shirt. So when our teams are out in the community, this is the kind of shirt that they wear. We've shared this with our other first responders so that they're identifiable. The brand for our work is HEART. It means Holistic Empathetic Assistance Response Teams. Our vehicles, you see we have minivans and SUVs that we drive. They do not have lights and sirens because we're not responding to the kinds of calls for which that's needed. I will say that our average response time is about 8 minutes to a call from being dispatched. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure that you knew the look and appearance of our teams. And then I'm going to touch briefly on the other 2 pilots. So care navigation, this pilot is about dedicated follow-up after a moment of crisis. One of the things we heard from other first responders, from the community, from behavioral health providers, is that there's only so much you can do in that first moment of crisis. And if we really want to be part of the continuum of care and connect people up to the care that they need and want, being able to follow up with people in the day or 2 following a crisis can be really essential in helping connect to our existing care providers. And so care navigation, that's what it's about. It includes a 2-person team of a clinician and a peer support specialist. Their goal is to meet with someone within 48 hours after an initial crisis response, not to provide long-term case management, but to get them connected up to other providers in our community. Our final pilot, this pilot is not yet live, is co-response. This pilot will launch in partnership with the Durham Police Department later this summer. This is about making sure that regardless of the risk factors posed by a call, if it's a mental health crisis and a weapon is present, for example, we want to make sure that we can support our residents in crisis and law enforcement in including clinicians on those calls. Co-response will pair a licensed clinician with a CIT-trained officer to respond to higher acuity, potentially higher risk calls that involve a mental or behavioral health crisis. And again, that will launch later this summer, and we will have ultimately 3 co-response teams during the pilot period. I've already mentioned this, so I won't belabor the point about our integration into 911, but it does come with a lot of safety benefits and a lot of efficiency. It's also the number that most people know and call, and including the number that 988 will transfer calls that require an in-person response. So being integrated in that system really helps. It means that our residents don't have to learn new numbers. They can continue to call the number that they're most familiar with. Now let me touch on the proposed interlocal agreement. Again, I want to thank our partners in EMS who have been with us really from the beginning, attending a lot of our meetings. So for Chief Lockhart and his team, this interlocal is about staffing the EMTs on our unarmed response team. We've done a lot of work with EMS to think through the various best paths for including these staff on our teams, including hire them ourselves, working with the fire department. But this is the option that we all feel is the strongest, best option during our pilot period. The interlocal would be for the initial period would go through the end of this calendar year, after which we would look at how things are going. It would have the possibility of renewing up through the end of the fiscal year. Again, during this pilot period while we're evaluating, the goal would be up to 3 EMTs, EMT basics, that could be put on our team. The city would cover all personnel costs associated with that. The county would provide the same type of supervision that Dr. Joyner provides over the EMTs. These would be paired with 2 other city employees with a licensed clinician and a peer support specialist who would be operating our unarmed response teams. We have had an EMT do some ride-alongs and observation just to learn about this during that period, and we're appreciative of that and being able to have that experience and eyes on our team. They remain Durham County employees, again, paid for by the city. They'll operate under EMS protocols, again, under Dr. Joyner, and also working closely with Captain Tripp with our community paramedicine program, which we see as really close partners in this work. And in the terms of their day-to-day oversight, our clinical managers operate over our teams. So in just terms of day-to-day operations, but still meeting regularly with Captain Tripp and Dr. Joyner. And I'll pause there. I guess the last thing that I'll say is we're going to be this month posting a data dashboard that's going to provide a lot of information regularly on our pilot. So call volume, what calls we're responding to, how many calls have we had to radio for backup. One thing I'll share in case I haven't is in our first month of operation, we haven't had a single safety concern with our unarmed response teams. We haven't had to radio for police backup because our teams felt that they were in harm's way or unsafe. They have felt safe and well prepared for the calls that we've sent them on. But we'll have a bunch of data out there for everyone in Durham to be looking at starting this month, and we'll look forward to sharing that with you. And then these are just some of the other resources that you can also find on our website. So frequently asked questions document, and then a report on some of the things we've learned from our community engagement. Thank you very much for the time today. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much for your report. Good information. I'll start on this side this time. Questions from commissioners?
I don't have any, sorry, I don't have any questions. I'm just very excited about this program, and I know when y'all launched, I may have missed something else, but this was one of the largest responses I've seen from the public about the launch of the HEART program. Like on social media, community members were excited about it. They hadn't heard about this community safety program, and I saw folks like not just here in Durham, but nationally were getting really excited to see that we were leading the way in this. So thank you to all of you and our city council members who led this initiative. I'm really excited to see the program grow outside of the pilot program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carter?
Yes, I too am thrilled to have this presentation and to hear about this great work that you've already done to get the programs off the ground, to develop the pilots, all the collaboration that's happened across agencies, the data analysis. It sounds like it's an incredibly well-researched and well-launched pilot initiative so far, and am very, very pleased to be part of it with our EMTs participating in your 3-person community response teams. I think the Heart brand is just lovely. It's wonderful. It looks nice. I like the holistic, empathetic assistance response teams. It's great. Whoever developed that, it really seems spot on. I just look forward to following your results. The data dashboard seems like a great idea. Just really believe this is going to be a benefit to our community in a number of ways. It'll be a benefit to our residents who'll be, better connected to the services that they need when they're in crisis. I think it can benefit our law enforcement because they will be responding to fewer calls where they may not be needed, and that will free up their time to really respond to the more violent crimes, in particular, where they are needed. So thank you all so very much for your work and your leadership on this.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you so much. I am so excited about not just the pilot that we're directly participating in, but all of the pilots. So thank you to all of you and everyone who has been a part of making this happen. And I'm really excited that our own staff have clearly been a part of it. Our community, our EMS department, Gudrun with CJRC Alliance, and that, Durham County staff have been there all along the way. And so I really appreciate the data dashboard, and I know we're going to learn a lot about this. This is really, again, coming back from the NACO conference, and I'm part of the Familiar Faces Initiative. What is happening here is these are national best practices. This is what communities are doing all over the country, and all the harm reduction, being trauma informed, and using peer support specialists, and being especially data driven. So you all are doing everything right, and one of the goals of Familiar Faces is diverting people away from our criminal justice system, stopping. This is a form of diversion. And the other thing is and we have a challenge with this, is connecting people to resources. I mean, this is something that we struggle with in Durham County government, is, getting people connected to the help that they need. So I'm looking forward to hearing how this is really working for people. One of my questions is, has the Office of the Sheriff been involved? Because I know that this will take care of, the majority of calls come in through go to the city's 911 system. But then we have the Office of the Sheriff. We do have some calls that go directly to them for the unincorporated areas. Have they been working with you all? Has there been any conversation about how we can eventually expand to the whole county?
Thank you, Commissioner. So I have met with Sheriff Burkhead on a few occasions, one-on-one, to talk about this work, to update Sheriff Burkhead on where we're at. We have not had longer engagements around what this work would look like longer term. I think right now we have clear boundaries of our work and working with the police department and others, but I do think there's opportunity as we demonstrate more the potential value of this work to engage Sheriff Burkhead in his office. But we do meet one-on-one to talk about this work.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear you are in conversation, because certainly there's a percentage of calls that will come in related to that, So, and my other question is, you mentioned, in the information we got, there was mention that the patient care record system that you all are going to be using. Is that record system going to, how is that going to align, for instance, with our community paramedics familiar faces record system and our HSMI system? And this is one of the big challenges, is how do we all share this data about folks who are, again, the familiar faces and who we all need to serve. So I'd like to hear more about that.
Great question. I think the good news is that we all collectively, between the county and the city, see a lot of opportunity for data sharing. And one of the good things that is going to lay the foundation for that is our department is going to be using the same type of clinical management software that EMS is moving to for the community paramedicine program. So we're both using a program called Julata, which is an industry standard, industry leader for this type of work. And I know that we have started using that, and EMS is, I believe, moving toward that, and I believe that's correct, and perhaps Chief Lockhart can speak to that. So having the same system is going to make data sharing a lot easier, and that part of the work of thinking through how and what data we share is work that we'll be working on over the course of the pilot. As you know, that type of data sharing takes real time and intentionality, but it's something that we're really committed to, not only with Durham County, but with Alliance and others, of thinking through that, because I do think it better positions us to best meet the needs of our residents when we're able to appropriately share data between providers. So we'll be working on that, but having the same management software system is a good step in the right direction.
Looks like Chief Lockhart wants to comment on that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jacobs. Yes, Mr. Smith's correct that the community paramedic program and community safety will be using the same platform, albeit for separate purposes, but there will be sharing of data between those two. We have that software now, I believe has been ordered. We have not implemented it yet. There'll be some training involved once it is, and then we'll get it operational.
Okay, well, fantastic, because that's, one of the biggest challenges is tracking people, making sure that they are, they don't fall through the cracks, and that they're getting the help they need, and that everybody is working together and moving in the same direction. So that's great. Thank you.
Commissioner Burns?
Yes, I have two quick questions. Well, one, thank you all for all this information. I do have to go back and hearken to something that Commissioner Alam said. I do remember when y'all broke the internet last month, when everything opened up, and it was reshared a bunch. I mean, I think everywhere, and we were tagged on a bunch of stuff, and there were a lot of news outlets, a lot of news articles, so congratulations on, like, a really nice send-off. We were in Denver, and you all mentioned Denver Star. I've often, every time people mention other cities, I'm always, I question some of it because, different states have different laws, different localities. And so you mentioned, not you, but in past, because I'm the liaison for safety and wellness, sometimes we mention states that are not exactly like ours. But one of the really neat things, we were in Denver this week, and even when I was in Memphis, got to see Denver's mayor. So they kicked theirs off in June of 2020, and they have been really optimistic with the work that they've done. They're 2 years in now. We have two, I think, up until this year. They only had one vehicle. They had one van, and then they had, I forget the name of the organization, but I think the Denver Cares Foundation gifted that city $1.4 million so that they could expand. We did get to do a lot of tours in Denver, so I got to pick their brains a little bit. So my first question is around kind of sort of diversified funding. So I do want to know, like, what are some things that you all are looking at? How are we looking at other partners? Because the same way, like, the city is benefiting, the business community is benefiting, the nonprofits are benefiting from the work that you all are doing. So how are we looking to kind of sort of diversify that portfolio of funding so that you all can have a more solid foundation, and it's not just us? Because I think everybody here has no problem supporting you all. I think over at the city council, 10 years from now, will that be the case? And, can you all continue to be solvent? So that was the first question. And then my second question is going to be for you. I did not get your last name. Yes, ma'am.
Abena Bediako.
Abner Bediako. Okay, that's why. Okay, so I don't like to mispronounce. So the first thing, how are you all looking on underfunded opportunities? And for Ms. Bediako, I just want you to tell us what the first month has been like since you're over the clinic, so you can tell us first person. So if y'all can answer those two for me, I'm good to go.
I'll take the first one, and then Abena can take the best part. So that's a really great point. In our first year, we've really been focused on planning and making use of the resources that the city's providing. But I do think there is a lot of opportunity out there for perhaps additional philanthropic support or other ways of funding, and that's one of the things that we want to spend more time on this year. So as an example, we did get in partnership with the Durham Police Department, we applied for and got federal funding to support 3 clinicians over a multi-year period that are being added to. That's going to support co-response. And I think there will be opportunities like that because this is such a growing area of interest in the country. And one of the things that we want to try to be strategic about identifying those opportunities and pursuing them. So I think that's a terrific point, and one that I hope that we'll have identified more opportunities over the course of this next year that we might be able to apply for. So thank you.
Thank you for your question. This first month has been exciting. It's been thrilling. The team is great. They come in excited on Monday morning, ready to go out into the field and help our neighbors. As Mrs. Smith has said, we have not had any issues with safety. We do daily debriefs, we do weekly debriefs, and there has been no concern of being in the field and being unsafe and being at harm's way. It truly feels as a family. Like we come in and we truly are happy to be there and doing the work. And that feeling comes across to our neighbors. We have gotten so many responses as, I'm glad you all showed up. I'm glad it's you. Wow, we didn't know about this. Like, how can we help? How can we volunteer? What else, do you all need? You all are angels. Just a lot of different comments from community members. It's been 4 weeks. I don't know. Like, it's just been really wonderful. And I want to share 2 brief stories just to add to the fullness of this month so far. So we, because I am leading the team, eventually I'll step back and the team will run by another licensed clinician. We went to a call in which one of our neighbors was in an active state of psychosis. And we, again, did not feel in harm's way. However, we recognized the fact that he was in need and he was unsafe. And if we did not act, then something may happen to him. So we did radio for backup so that he could be transferred to the hospital. And our presence there, I think, added comfort to him. We were able to talk to him, call his name. He did share his name with me, so I was able to have direct eye contact, and when he started to elevate, able to calm him down so that things could run smoothly. And I also think because of our presence there, law enforcement noticed it. And it was a very smooth transition and transfer to the hospital in which he was able to get care, and he's actually been transferred to long-term hospitalization so that he could become more stable and return in the community. His housing has been held. We were able to contact his guardian and get some of that information that if we were not present would not have occurred. And then the second story, it really happened this past Friday, because we go out into the community, we do take the live calls, and we also self-initiate. So we are starting to become familiar with our neighbors. We go out, we offer water, we offer snacks, just having a conversation and letting folks know we're there to help them, connecting them to housing resources and different type of resources that they may need. A call came out in the village, and if you all know that area, what it is, my team was on site actually, so they were there. They were able to arrive before police came because it was our team were called and also officers were called. But because we were there, we got there first. Some of the neighbors recognized us and was like, "Oh, we know them. You all chill. Come on, let's move. Let's go to another space." And because of that relationship we built over the last 2 or 3 weeks, our neighbors they left before law enforcement got there, before it could potentially escalate to something else. I wanted to share that because we're continuing to strive to do more and be more in the community, but we're also making strides now and making an impact now.
So thank you for the work that you are doing and getting ready to do. So when there's a call, when you go out, do the police go along with you?
No.
They do not.
They do not. If there's a call in which there's a history of potential violence in that location, like with the call that came out as a trespass call, typically our teams go out alone because we have been trained to handle those calls. But because of the location, dispatch also dispatched 911 to that location. But again, we were able to de-escalate and provide service, so they were not needed.
So I'm just trying to understand, the call comes in and you go to that area where the call goes into what, 911?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
The call comes into 911. Call taker answers it and goes through the protocol just like they would with any other call taker. Based on how the call taker answers the questions, the computer-assisted dispatch system offers a recommended response. So we have integrated into that so that if it's a certain type of call, for example, if it's a trespass with no weapon involved, then our team is recommended to be the first responder. Abena told 2 interesting and rare stories where police were also dispatched, but on most of our calls, we're dispatched alone, law enforcement's not involved, and we haven't had any safety concerns or issues.
So Commissioner Howard,
The
core in the fall, y'all will have.
Oh, response, yes. So when we get to the fall, where we are taking, right now there are calls that are more serious in nature that we don't take. So it might be a suicide threat with a weapon involved or a trespass with a weapon. Those calls will ultimately be for co-response. We don't go to them. We will be handling them through a joint response between our departments when co-response launches later this summer that will put a clinician with a CIT-trained officer to be first responders as a joint team.
So the matter of life and death really is on the responsibility of the person that receives that call and how they handle that call.
Could you restate the question? I'm sorry, I'm just not sure I completely understand.
So when the call comes in, the 911, the 911 operator, and how they handle that call can be a matter of life and death for that person that they're calling about.
I would say that this response functions no differently than any other responses in terms of the importance or significance or the life and death nature of it, that we have a very scripted set of questions that are asked of all callers that vary based on the type of situation that the caller calls about. That's what we have had and what we're continuing to work with. And then if that call is just like it was beforehand, deemed a very low priority call, where there are very little risk factors, where there's no weapon involved, where it ultimately is about connecting someone to needs and services, then instead of sending law enforcement, which is what we did a month ago, we can now send these new teams, and in our first month in, that's working very well.
So who makes that decision?
Who makes a decision about who to send?
Mm-hmm.
It's based on careful research and protocol, so it's built in. The recommendation is made in advance based on the type of call that it is. So again, if the caller calls and the call taker is going through the questions that they ask of every caller, based on the answers to those calls, a response is recommended, and then we send the appropriate response like we would for any call.
So, Ryan, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and this is just a little sensitive for me. I've heard of too many black and brown young people that have been shot down due to an operator handling the call inappropriately. And so this is where my questions are coming from. The police shows up and they feel that there's a threat because of the way the operator has handled the call, and they shoot the person down. So the question was whether or not the operator that forward your calls, will they be handling sensitive calls of that nature? And will the police be showing up where you are to be and doing your work? Those are my concerns.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing where you're coming from. I appreciate that. I would say that there are two different ways that cities are going about this in the country. There are some cities that have to rely entirely on the discretion of call takers who do not have what are like our systems, more highly programmed systems. And that relies a lot on call takers learning about new responses, trying to memorize and make the right decision in the moment. That's a lot harder. We haven't done that here, and I think that overall that is better. It means that we're more likely, because we're not relying on the call taker learning about a brand new response and making a decision in a moment. We're able to help program in based on what are the various risk factors. We have over 1,400 final determinants is what they're called, and those are. And I say that because the system, there's a whole variety of questions that could get asked, and based on how those questions get answered, a final determinant will be recommended. And because we have over 1,400, you can imagine that it is fairly granular. It helps us make more informed decisions about, based on different types of situations, who to send. And we have attached within that, so within 2 final determinants, whether or not it's appropriate right now for an unarmed response or for a co-response to go. And these are pilots, which means we're going to be looking every day and every week at the calls to understand if we're making the right decisions and recommendations or if things need to be evaluated and changed. But I do think that ability that we're working within a system like ours, that we're not putting excess burden on call takers who already have a very difficult, stressful job to learn about all new responses and to remember something, that we have a system that is making recommendations based on a lot of careful thought and consideration and looking at evidence. But yes, that means we still need to be closely looking at those things. We meet every day at 4:30 with emergency communications to review calls from the days and talk about what's working and what's not. And we take all this work very seriously, and as carefully as we plan, we bring a lot of humility and the need to be very attentive and carefully following this.
Well, thank you. I'll be listening and paying attention to what's happening going forward, and appreciate the clinicians that will be working with you. So thank you. Are there any other questions, commissioners? There's nothing else? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? That one. So the next item on our agenda is a discussion of proposed items for the NCACC legislative goals process. And that's Ms. Craig.
Positive things going on in our community. I'm excited to bring forward your proposed legislative items for the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners process. Just like to take a couple of minutes to just kind of reframe the process. Typically, as we are looking forward to the start of the long session, as you know, the long session starts in January 2023. We are asked to submit any legislative items that would have statewide implications to the process. The process involves counties submitting items by a date certain, those items being vetted by the 7 committees, which are Tax and Finance, Public Education, General Government, Health and Human Services, Justice and Public Safety, Environment, and Agriculture. Once they go through that vetting process, then the Board of Directors will vote on the proposals, and then that package goes before the full membership. Typically, that meeting is held in January of the year, but as you heard back in the spring, the association is advancing the process. So now, in November, you will have your Legislative Goals Conference, and that's when your voting delegates will vote on the final legislative proposal. So our goal today is to share with you what I have already received from department heads, go over those items, and allow you to offer any ideas that you have that you want to add to the list. Once I get all of that, I will finalize it, bring it back to a future agenda for your formal vote, and then it will be able to go over to County Commissioners Association. The date by which everything must be approved and received by them is September 12th. So we hopefully will get that done in this month of August. So are there any questions about the process? No? All right, well, I'll very quickly try to run through the items that you have before you. The first item would come through the Justice and Public Safety Committee, and I will just note, I think you may have already heard that Jim Groves had to leave because of family situation, so we'll keep him in our thoughts and prayers. So this bill is to seek legislation to promote the utilization of business and homeowner insurance premiums to support county emergency management programs. So Jim and I spoke briefly before he left, and I'll try to put this simply. The proposal is that on a homeowner's premium, we might tack on perhaps a $2 fee, and on a business proposal, perhaps a $4 fee. Those funds would go into helping to implement an emergency management support program where the funds would help offset the cost of infrastructure, staff, and equipment to help the community in its addressing significant disasters. Jim mentioned there is a Florida model, and he certainly can provide that Florida model to us for further review, and perhaps we might want to structure this recommendation thusly. So that is what he submitted for your consideration. The next few items would come into the Health and Human Services Committee, and I believe Ben may still be here. Yes. So I'll ask Ben if he wants to come forward and just give high level of the items that he submitted for your consideration. And hopefully you'll have fewer questions of him than you would have of me. Thanks, my friend.
Good afternoon. We always seem to have legislative goals in social services because there's so much happening. And we did submit for this year. Some of these goals may look familiar to you, especially 3 and 4. However, 1 and 2 are a little bit of a new twist for us. Goal 1 is regarding Medicaid expansion, which, as you know, is a hot topic still in the General Assembly. And we as a county are definitely supporting Medicaid expansion. I would note with Medicaid expansion, there are there's a little hesitancy of the Directors Association to support it as an association due to the impact the Medicaid expansion would have on a DSS agency, obviously increased workloads, increased applications, increased need for staff, so there's cost associated with that. So they've been somewhat neutral, but I think you as a county and as a board have definitely supported Medicaid expansion. We support it because we know there's a lot of disparities amongst our uninsured, and this would really start to close the gap and help us a lot. So we did want to focus that to be our number one. The number two goal is to improve the system of care for children and families within child welfare. Child welfare is one of our most crucial and critical services. And it is a service that is definitely stressed for resources right now, especially trying to find ways to get families what they need for services. And then when it comes to children that are in our care, we have additional challenges there for placement services and resources there as well. You hear stories of foster care children lingering in agencies because we cannot get placement for them due to very severe mental health and behavioral disorder issues. So we are definitely looking to try to close some gaps there, and we've really been pushing the state as an association on these issues because this is very important to us, and this is somewhat tied to the Medicaid foster care plan that you guys are aware of, and that could help us get to a better place potentially. So we wanted to focus that on goal number two due to the challenges and obviously the importance of that service and trying to get services to our families and children. Goal 3 and 4 are kind of long-standing goals. So this is about getting to equitable funding in the area of child welfare and adult services with the state. As you know, the state has little skin in the game when it comes to those services. That really falls to the county and then some federal dollars that we have. And we have been pushing for kind of a 50-50 share of the non-federal costs in both of these areas. And when I say adult services, I'm talking about the wide range of services there, adult protective services and guardianship being the primary focus, because those are the ones that really falls to the county. We only have really one funding source for those services, and then the rest of it falls to the county. And as you know, that is a growing population, and that is a growing service and need. And then, of course, child welfare is obviously another big one that we would like to have some more equitable cost distribution in. So those are kind of some long-standing goals that probably look familiar to you. So those are the ones that our board reviewed and decided we would submit. So happy to answer any questions as best I can. Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question, but just for the benefit of the board, I think it's important, especially related to the adult services, to emphasize that even though, what do we have, like a $9 billion rainy day fund now? We get no money from the state for our seniors, none. So, we've got waiting lists for food, for in-home care, all these things, and we get zero funding from our state legislature for our seniors. So it's really, I consider it criminal. Every time I see that waiting list every month, it makes me sick, literally, because we have people, our seniors, who are so desperate for things like food, and we want to keep them at home, and people who need help. And the same thing with our children. We want to focus on prevention. We want, our families getting back to, you raised Commissioner Howerton. What are we doing for 0 to 3? We can't do it all with local funding. We need the state to step up. And they want us to do child welfare reform, and that's great. But we also need the help with funding for the services to support our families.
And I do recall that we have made this appeal before, because as you said, we don't get any funds.
And the federal dollars are often capped. There's only one open-ended pot of money in child welfare, and that's 4E, and that's restricted. So all the other funding sources, especially in the adult services area, are capped block grants. So that's why you have waiting lists. Yeah. This morning, you voted on one of those funding sources.
It said unfunded mandate.
Yes, that's one of those things that behooves us as elected
to build some relationships with some folks so that they won't slight Durham, because it is about relationships with it just is.
Okay, are those all the questions for Health and Human Services? All right, thank you. Ken.
Thank you, my pleasure.
The next item falls under General Government, and it is submitted by Curtis Massey.
Saw him over there.
And we actually did talk about this when we met with our delegation earlier in the spring, if you recall.
Oh, okay. Since you were summarizing other stuff, this is the one we had discussed about the authorization for remote meetings during a declared state of emergency. As you know, in the aftermath of COVID, the General Assembly passed a statute authorizing local governments to meet remotely during an emergency declared by the governor. And the conversation had been, well, when the governor's declaration runs out, which he's now announced he intends to have it in on August 15th, if there were still a need, would it be beneficial to local governments to have that authority? And I was told to prepare something, which I have. And as she mentioned, we had discussed that with the delegation a couple of months ago, and I'm glad to discuss it to the extent you have any interest or questions now, but it was basically just extending the statutory authorization to include locally declared emergency.
And you'll recall that we've had some of our own disasters, if you will, the gas explosion, a few other things. What if a train going right behind our building were to derail and we had a gas leak or something that would be local? We wouldn't have the authority to act remotely unless we got this. And so that's something we're trying to allow the other counties to have, of course. So that's the purpose.
So you're asking to extend that ability ongoingly that we can vote remotely?
If there is a local disaster, yes.
If it's a local disaster?
A locally declared disaster, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And the chair would be the one to declare.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Question?
Mine was quick. I thank you for giving some examples. I did see the one you gave about Winston-Salem and the fertilizer plant. I do remember that one. And I was about to ask, would it be a full vote? But you're saying the way the statute would be written or the recommendation is that it would be the chair's decision. My question is, I wasn't on the board then, what did you all do when we had the explosion? You remember the one?
The gas explosion
I'm trying
over
to
at Brightly.
what did Winston-Salem kind of sort of do? And since we do have some of these real examples, what steps were taken during those two kind of local examples what were the steps? And then
Well, let me say, when the gas explosion happened, that was far enough away, and the meeting schedule was such that it did not require an alteration.
So that's that. Okay.
When the fertilizer incident occurred in Winston-Salem, that was during COVID. So they were already covered for remote meetings.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, those were my two big ones. I get it now, but I guess we don't have an example of something that was maybe pre-COVID and
That shut us down.
That shut us down, and where it put us.
No, ma'am.
And
we're trying to be proactive and think ahead.
Okay, yeah, because it could be schools, right? It might not necessarily be just us. I'm trying to figure out how far does this authority go, because let's just say this was not close to this building, but it was close to one of our schools. Do we extend this to a school and say, now that we know that we can virtually learn, do we now say, all right, this school does not have to go in today? So that's what I'm thinking about. Like, is it, because you said, derail out here. I don't want us to look at, I don't want us to write something an inch and then a future body be able to take a mile. But I also don't want us to just think, if something happens to this administrative building, because we do have other centers of leadership
You're correct.
that could be affected. So that's where I'm going with it. And again, these are suggestions.
Oh, yeah.
No. Well, and let me say this. If a school building was affected, this is about public bodies meeting, governing bodies. That would be the school system saying we can't use a facility. But this would apply also to the city and give them the authority to declare an emergency. And if they declared an emergency, then that would also affect the school board downtown. Yes, ma'am.
So things may be different now that we've gone through a pandemic. I remember before we were not allowed to be able to call in and vote. That's before the pandemic. We could call in and listen to an agenda, but we could not vote. So whether the legislature will change that at this point, your guess is good as mine.
Actually, ma'am, that comes back to the rules of procedure that the board has adopted for itself.
Mm-hmm. The board adopted that we couldn't vote.
Y'all do have some restrictions on that.
Right.
There have been several resolutions. And, you know, we can talk about this. I certainly want to discuss it with the county attorney more. But if you wanted to get into what are the restrictions the board's imposed on itself and the leeway and the choices to make, we can do that.
I guess what you're trying to do is to see if it can be a statewide.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with it if the board doesn't. Yeah, that we can put it forward to the board, to the association.
Yeah, I actually didn't, before I read this, didn't know that currently, since there is no state of emergency declared by the governor, that expired, that if we wanted to have a remote meeting, let's say the five of us decided, whoa, there's a surge, because of the BA5 variant, and we've decided that we want to have the next few meetings remotely, just to try to follow strong, stringent public health measures. We don't have that authority right now, is what you're saying. I didn't know that. I thought we could. Let's say there are some perfunctory decisions that we had to make. This happened recently with our bond orders and things. And rather than convene a big meeting, we had a remote meeting. It was probably still during the state of emergency, just let me clarify that. But it would be nice to be able to do that kind of thing, right? For quick meetings where something has come up. So, I would support it. I definitely would support it. I think we should be able to do it already. So there.
Okay. Let's put it to the.
Yes, I don't really have a question. I'm just getting confirmation that we don't have authority to do that now.
Well, the governor's state of emergency expires August 15th.
Oh, it hasn't
Right.
yet.
So
Okay.
that's what he
Right.
stated as his intent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that should be a local decision for sure.
And again, just remember, we're putting these before you today. You have time to think through them, ask some more questions, and you will vote on them at a subsequent meeting.
Okay, and then that process with the association
It's a rigorous process.
Rigorous process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't say it like that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any more questions of Curtis?
No.
All right, we will keep moving. I know Rod was here earlier, but he is not here. But under Health and Human Services, again, he has submitted several items. It's basically the advocacy committee for the Public Health Association. That sound right, Joanne? Yes. And he has shared several items that are, I'll start with the first one, proposed legislation. he would like us to endorse proposed legislation to amend the definition of lead poisoning hazard in GS Statute 130A-131.7 with some different language. Any concentration of lead in drinking water equal to or greater than 7 parts per billion. It's currently 15 parts per billion. So what we're doing is strengthening the definition.
And Deborah, just one clarification, was it changed from 5 to 7 parts per billion? Because what I'm looking at said 5 initially.
You're right, 5.
Okay.
Right. My apologies. Yes. Next item is endorse proposed legislation to expand access to comprehensive prenatal care for undocumented immigrant women. The General Assembly should adopt the Children's Health Insurance Program option to provide comprehensive prenatal, labor, delivery, and immediate postpartum care to undocumented immigrant women. Again, it's a policy position of the group. So we would be just, your board would just be supporting what they've already put forward.
Deborah, what's the group? What is the group that's recommending these? I think these are excellent.
The Public Health Association.
So it's sort of like the State Public Health Association. Great.
Endorse any proposed legislation on a variety of workplace health issues that would support maternal and child health, including guarantee North Carolina workers the right to pregnancy and lactation accommodation in the workplace, guarantee North Carolina workers the right to use their sick days to care for a loved one, seek preventive care, or deal with physical, mental, or legal impacts of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and address paid leave benefit in North Carolina. Certainly, these are items that our board has gone on record endorsing, and again, it's also in their policy position. Endorse appropriate requests to provide additional state funding to address increased demands associated with communicable and emergent infectious diseases. I think given we are still dealing with COVID and now there's the emergence of monkeypox and who knows what comes next, we need to be adequately funded in those areas. I think that's what they're explaining. Endorse any proposed legislation or administrative efforts to restore women's and children's health block grant funding to local health departments. And who's on the health board? So I would imagine this is something that you all had discussed.
Yeah, this is something that the board had discussed, and from us, all of our recommendations from the Board of Public Health has been unanimous.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Support legislation that will close the health insurance coverage gap in North Carolina and provide access to affordable coverage to the more than 500,000 individuals living in the coverage gap. The appropriate legislation must address 4 key principles, which are accessibility, affordability, accountability, and economic development. Care for Carolina will lead on this issue. And of course, we know that this is something that's been on our list for years and years, and we think we are so close. We really thought we had it in the last weeks of the session, and again, the can unfortunately got kicked down the road yet again. But I understand that talks are continuing. Endorse proposed legislation to amend North Carolina's youth access law to ensure effective enforcement of the new age restriction for purchasing tobacco products.
What is the new age? Do we know?
I don't know if it's changed from 18 to 21 or the other way.
if I'm not mistaken, they want it to go up.
Okay.
Like that is what the endorsement is. I'm not.
So it's 18 now, they want.
And they want to move it up. I don't know if it's 21 or 20, but yeah, they want to move it up.
Okay, great.
So again, consider how you would want that.
We wouldn't want you to be able to buy tobacco products as long as you can still buy guns.
All right. Another issue. Thank you. Endorse proposed legislative or appropriation requests that would increase funding for school nutrition programs and food banks. And in our local legislation of the last term, we definitely endorsed the idea of increasing funding for food banks. And I think there was some money included in the first ARPA funding that came down from the state. But again, this is certainly a continuing need with the price of food escalating and everything. We certainly want to make sure that when people return to food banks, as they are doing, that there are resources. Okay. Endorse proposed legislation requests that would support funding for active routes to school and increase bike and pedestrian programs. That certainly goes along with the position that the board has taken in the past. Supporting alternative means of transportation also would go along with our need to improve our air quality and our goals. And so I would see supporting this one as well.
Can that be combined with something else?
Well, it's their policy, but certainly we could put it on something. You might want to edify it on your local goals. So certainly it can be rewritten to include.
Yeah, I think it just, I think it would need to be combined with something else.
Certainly.
Projecting what I've experienced over the years.
And I'm happy to work on that with you.
Attach it to something else that's there.
Mm-hmm. I'll make a note and we'll revisit that. Support legislation that will remove the exemption for state and local government employees from the social work title protection law. And I am not versed in this area. And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means.
The social work title protection law, do you know anything about that? I'll put a question mark there and we can get some additional information. Aha.
Yeah, they've got,
Thank you.
Yeah, they say the background. Yeah.
I thought I was at the end. Thank you for that. So the background talks about the law that was created in 2009, and it stipulates that no one can have the word social worker in their job title without a social work degree unless they work for state or local government. I don't know the background of that other than what's here. So this is something we really need to hear from Rod about this.
We need to hear from Ben about it because this could be where public health and social services have a conflict.
Yeah.
Because this is about protecting people's job titles and professionalism. So I think we would need to, I think that one needs to be.
We'll put a question mark and I'll get the two of those gentlemen together.
I think that one should be pulled. Joanne, what do you think?
Good afternoon. Fortunately, in public health, for social workers, they have to be have a degree in social work. So I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure for social DSS, that would be also true. But it's good to connect to make sure that we're consistent with that. Thank you.
So, yeah, it almost sounds like we need to pull it because they're saying something different from what we just heard. Again, this is just our first conversation, so we still have work to do. And then there are two bills that the group decided to oppose, but at this time, I'm not sure that the bills are actually active now since the session is effectively concluded, but I'll just read them. Opposed, Senate Bill 40 and any other proposed legislation that would expand the type and size of fireworks sold to consumers in North Carolina. And oppose House Bill 572, a bill that would potentially destabilize decades of effort on the part of public health workers to protect North Carolinians from disease. So again, you have given me your feedback on these items, and certainly I will get back with Rod and work through, and we probably will bring forward an amended list for your further consideration. And so now, if you have any items that you would like to propose, I am ready to receive them and add them to the list.
I do have one question, and Ms. Pierce may know the answer to this. This is about the Medicaid for our persons in our jails. Did we ever get that passed or get? I know that the association was working on it. Whatever happened? Do you know what happened with that?
Madam Chair, I would have to check on the status of what's going on with the Medicaid for those who are detained. However, we do know that when our community members, if they're detained, some of their benefits do cease.
Right.
So I will get back to identify where that was to ensure that services are maintained for health and well-being. I'll check.
Thank you. I remember Gail worked on that a while, and then when she left, we had conversations with Kevin Leonard at the association about it. But I don't know where it is at this point, yeah.
I can check with Amber and see if she has any update on that.
Anybody has anything else? Commissioner Burns?
Deborah, you're going to be so mad at me. Kidding. I do have a few. They are quick. I'm just going to list them, and hopefully I can work with my colleagues and we can elevate some of them. I think for a lot of us that went to Denver, it was like, data dump, and we saw some good ideas. I know when I was in the economic development room with housing, some people were really surprised that we would, as a county, we were actually doing housing, right? In Miami-Dade got up and said they were doing 14,000 units. And I said, well, never mind about what we're doing. But, they're bigger, right? And so we operate the way big boys operate. So I did want to throw out there, we talk about these things as a board, but Commissioner Jacobs said it a second ago, there's just so much that we cannot do by ourselves. So one of the things I would love to see us talk about, we're talking about Medicaid expansion. We sat here today and we talked about seniors. There's some conversation around the expansion of SNAP. North Carolina is one of 10 counties in the state where counties have to administer SNAP, right? And it seems like it's federal, but it is also a legislative priority, and that might help us when we're feeding some of our seniors. So I don't know what the language looks like. I took some time to go to NACO's website. They actually do have a legislative toolkit for counties that are looking to expand SNAP in their counties, and I think that would help us, especially with food insecurity, especially with the requests that we see with our seniors. So what does that request look like, especially when we were excited to get, she got the same one, so she has it right here, like I have it, and she has it. So, girl, okay. So they give us a lot, but, we get to sit in our rooms and read it. So that was the first one. Okay. My second one, we have not said anything about economic development. Y'all, I don't want the next time we do a survey, they say, oh, our elected officials did not do enough to deal with growth. I don't think that's what I don't put that blame on the last board, the last city council, the last county commission. I just think, it's like Durham is a tugboat that caught a shark, and everything's coming here now, and so goes Durham, so goes the state. So I actually think the state should be doing a little bit more instead of judging us and saying Durham gets everything. Commerce, we're a magnate, and so I think that there's some support there that we should be able to ask for. And last but not least, number 3. I'm surprised I'm the only one saying this because I'm the one that gets kicked the most. We need, whether they listen to it or not, we need to talk to them about supporting our schools and expansion of Leandro. That's all I'm gonna say. I like how nobody said that before me. I'm winning today.
On you first.
Right, right, right. Because I called them, but whether they listen or not, there were 5 counties that didn't get a split of that $100 million.
Yeah.
We are in a dollars arm race for our bus drivers. Our nutrition services folks need 40 more people. We need 72 more people. We know what we need for after school care, and some of this. I know y'all think it's me we just don't have it. And I don't want us to set up a legislative calendar and not go over there when we're the county that's growing the most, we're putting these jobs in, and other counties do not have these suite of social services we have. The work that Gudrun does, that Joanne does, that Rod does, all the work that they do, Wake County's not doing that suite of social services. Mecklenburg County's not doing that. And so since we are such a caring group of individuals, like our money is gone. So I hope that we can ask for some support for our teachers so that they can finally get the raises that they deserve from a state level. I've seen what some of the political action committees in this county have already set up as their legislative agenda. They are laser focused on coming to us again. We need to be laser focused on asking up for some support. So those are my 3. Some legislative help around expansion of SNAP, what we can look at to get more economic development dollars and make sure that our delegation is asking directly and not putting that just on the Department of Commerce and Secretary Sanders and the JD things we do, and just an expansion for our schools. So I just had 3. Those are my 3. And I know I'm asking, but, staff push back on me and say, well, you got this idea, Commissioner Burns, what do you have? So those are just mine.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had 5 things on my list, but one of them I agree with Commissioner Burns wholeheartedly about asking for full funding for the Leandro decision. So I echo that. I would like to, I'm thinking back to what we had on our legislative agenda earlier, and Ellen is not here anymore, but we had some wording about that was very comprehensive and inclusive about increased funding for transit and transportation that would include both urban and rural areas and address some of the kind of current restrictions and requirements for matches and things like that. So
Yeah, it was rural and urban. I do remember that. It
so
was
if we could look
STI.
back at that.
We got something from STI, right?
Yes, exactly. Because we have in our MPO some legislative goals, and I remember we kind of synthesized it to that one. So if we could bring that one back.
Okay.
And then, of course, we have our affordable housing, teacher housing, and I don't know, that's actually on our list of directives, and Willie has stepped away, but I don't know where we're at right now with that, but.
So it was, initially it was just for teachers. And Representative Austin asked if we could include, I believe it was fire, law enforcement perhaps.
Okay.
Because that was a model she had seen from another community that had gotten it through.
Okay.
And so she edited ours, but again, it still didn't move.
So, I mean, maybe we could come up with something around workforce housing and include teachers, our first responders, something that, again, would appeal to all counties. So that would be my second one. And then I know we've had this many times as well, is about expanding eligibility for the state property property tax exemption categories,
homestead and that
kind
of thing.
and expanding. I mean, I think it's worth not giving up on that. And then the last thing, we may not be ready for this yet, but one of the most, I think, important things related to the Familiar Faces initiative is one of their recommendations is that there are statewide templates for data sharing. And that's something that we're going to be talking about. And I already talked to Kevin Leonard and Amy Basin about it. And when we have when we have one of our meetings where they're bringing in national folks about how you do data sharing agreements, because I think this is something that, anyway. So we may be too early on this, but this is something we really, if the state had something that everyone could use, would be really amazing.
Yes.
So.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Carter?
Yes, very interesting conversation, and I think we've had great suggestions all around from staff and from fellow commissioners. Regarding education, anytime there's a request for increased funding, I favor it. I think we should maybe confer with the Board of Education and see if there are any policies that we can jointly advocate for together with North Carolina School Board Association. I mean, I wonder what's on their legislative agenda, and strengthen numbers. We could join them in the advocacy efforts if there are those that we agree.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes the Leandro funding, of course. I also think that in addition to the ones that Public Health brought forward, and maybe there would be more guidance in this, the national models of policies that you've all brought back in the various areas. But I'm thinking in particular, policies to support children and families, policies to support women and children, policies, to support maternal health. And I don't have the specific policy right now, but I bet they do. And so that might, I would like for us to try to find something along those lines. And I'd be happy to think about it more.
Okay.
And do we think that we would have any hope in this sort of political season and following some of the horrific mass shootings of late, in particular at schools, that this might be a good time to try to bring forward something, anything related to gun safety?
Okay.
I'm sort of asking what you guys think. I mean, I know we all support gun safety regulations and restrictions, but and my answer would be yes, just what the heck, let's try. But okay. Does it make any sense to just ask the state to increase the minimum wage?
I'm sorry to hear you.
Does it make any sense to ask the state to increase the minimum wage? Would we be able to get support for that across the Association of North Carolina Counties?
For everybody to pay a minimum wage?
Just the states, whatever their $7.50 per hour is like the state's minimum wage right now. It's not been raised in God knows how long. Could we ask for it to be raised, and would that be something that NCACC would get behind?
I mean, we can try. Nothing wrong with trying.
Would you want to put a dollar amount on that?
I don't know. I'd have to research it more to know.
Yeah.
I think we would need a dollar amount.
Let's do some research
You always have
on
to
that.
think about the rural counties that you
Yeah.
work with. The rural counties are, especially businesses in the rural counties, they may push back on you, but it's nothing wrong with asking.
We can ask.
Okay. And I don't know if the state could provide additional support for local affordable housing efforts, something broader than the teacher workforce housing issue we face, but just in general, something about that. And I'm sorry I don't have anything more specific, but those are sort of broad general categories, and I'd be happy to look at any of them more if that would be helpful.
Commissioner Long?
To Commissioner Carter's second to last point, I was just looking up quickly to see the NC Budget and Tax Center's average cost of living for the state of North Carolina. I think for one adult and one child, NC Budget and Tax Center has it listed as $1,850 as the cost of living. If we were wanting to push a number, that would be something that maybe was more broad enough to fit the entire state. To start off with, I wrote down ditto, Commissioner Burns and everyone around the education and funding for Leandro. And I know this was one of our legislative priorities, but re-emphasize, like in the past, and we've continued to push for it, but re-emphasizing it, the funding for Durham Tech and pushing for, with conversations, we've seen that Wake Tech continuously gets funding to the level that they need to be the top technical community college across the state. But with Durham Tech's growth, trying to push for our legislators to fund us at a rate that's similar to Wake Tech so we can have that same level of growth. And
I was thinking about how we would frame it, because remember, these are state ads, not our local ones. So it would have to be broad to increase funding for community colleges,
Yeah.
I would imagine, rather than just specific for Durham Tech in this case.
Okay, that'd be good. And then this is kind of on Commissioner Carter's ask for the gun safety laws. Probably may not get it, but doesn't hurt to ask around, the preemption restrictions we have here for municipalities, especially around property tax and what constitutes as utilities. So, if we're able, right now we're looking at broadband expansion, if we can push the state to start allowing municipalities to consider broadband and internet a utility service that we're currently blocked from doing right now, and then property taxes giving municipalities the power to be able to control our own property taxing system.
I just have a question about that, because you said municipalities and this is counties. So do you mean counties controlling? Okay.
Okay.
So I think you got a long list there, but I want to add a couple more things to it.
No problem.
Of course, anything that we can come up with that supports families, women and families, children, any kind of language that support families. The other one is around our Board of Elections and our election workers. What language can we come up with that protects?
Protect?
Yeah, protect our Board of Election and our workers. The other ones is around nursing homes. Is there any language that we can come up with that give some protection around what's happening in our nursing homes, that the patients are being protected?
Patient safety?
Safety, public safety, well, yeah.
In nursing homes?
Around nursing homes, because those are issues that have come up. And I'm sure there are others that we can support. I've got a whole list of resolutions that came from the conference, that some of them pertain to us, some of them may not, but we can use some of the same language that they are using and make it fit for Durham. And I'll share that with you.
Thank you. Don't forget, our resolution was approved.
Our resolution
unanimous.
went through. I was so excited about that. We had a resolution that went through, and I couldn't be on the floor, but I did go to the meeting. This was the Board of Directors meeting, so if they had any questions, then we could push it through, but there were no questions. They approved it unanimously. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Well, we'd been working on it since 2020, and your board approved it at that time, the language, and that was the NACO Legislative Conference that none of the commissioners could attend because they were in election mode, and so you gave me permission to go and represent it, and so it was accepted positively at that level. We were able to continue it at last year's conference, and then this time it actually finally became a part of the permanent American County platform unanimously. So
Yeah.
It was around continuing funding, federal funding for pre-K. And we talked about how important it was to give every child a good start and to be able to continue the supports that are already in place and to enhance them so that kids get the best start to have success in life.
You know, this teamwork makes the dream work. A couple of times there that we have done this thing together, and, you know, we acknowledge that we are doing it as a team, and the folks at the national level appreciate that. So it's a good thing when we do it as a team. So, anything else? You got something else?
Yes, I just wanted to lift one up. Thank you so much, Gudrun, for reminding me of this one, and wanted to make sure we have it passed on to you, GM Craig Ray, of adequately funding the court systems.
Funding for the court system?
Yeah. So just more resources into our court systems, not just the DA's office, but like all the offices within the courts.
Yeah, that's another one that we have typically supported on our final approved agenda. Happy to do it.
Nothing else? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and I will work
we'll
up
be sending
an
you other
amended
things.
list. I'll bring it back as quickly as I can. It will not be back on Monday.
That's fine. That's fine.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Deborah. All right, the next item is to appoint voting delegate for North Carolina Association of Commissioners 115th Annual Conference. And I was trying to remember who did it last, and so I did. Wendy is the voting delegate and Commissioner Burns as the alternate. If that works out for everybody. All right, now we're at Commissioner comments.
I'm sorry, Chair Howard, we have to suspend the rules to vote?
We need a...
Suspend the rules and then vote on that.
Okay, you need that handle now.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So we need to suspend the rules.
I move to
Need a
suspend the
motion
rules.
to suspend the rules.
Move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Okay. Did you second it?
Yes, I second.
It's moved and properly second to suspend the rules. We'll need a roll call.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Burns?
Aye.
Commissioner Carter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Jacobs?
Aye.
Chair Howerton?
Aye. It's approved unanimously to suspend the rules. Now we need a motion to appoint voting delegates to the Association Commissioners 115th Annual Conference.
I move that we nominate Commissioner Vice Chair Jacobs to be the voting delegate and Commissioner Burns as the alternate.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Burns?
Aye.
Commissioner Carter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Jacobs?
Aye.
Chair Howerton?
It's been approved unanimously. Okay. Monica said, let's get this done. Okay. Now we're down to commissioner comments. And there may be comments that commissioners have from the conference, or any other comments that you may have. 3 minutes per commissioner. And see if we can get through this. Okay, who wants to go first?
I have one. Okay. I just want to be sure we all have on our calendars the October 6th farmland tour, farm tour, Durham County Farm Tour. The Farmland Board is working, Soil and Water, they're working really hard to put together a cool, amazing, very interesting and informative tour for us. And I hope that's already on everyone's calendar, but I'm afraid it might not be. So October 6th.
About my calendar.
There was a calendar invite sent out by Tanya. So it should be on everyone's calendar.
Stop. I did. I got it. So I had all these things on the side here that I hadn't clicked on to go on my calendar, and she was like, oh, my God.
88. She had 88
Announcements.
calendar invites.
Okay, I got it. Everybody else got 6. Okay. Anything else on this side? Nothing? All right. Over here, starting with.
Well, we've talked a lot about some of the stuff that we did at NACO, so I'm not gonna beat that dead horse because I think that all the paper that they use and all the trees that they use to make the pamphlets, Commissioner Jacobs, based on her desk, brought back every pamphlet they had, and so there is no need. There's this thing, Commissioner Jacobs. It is called the internet. They have these things called PDFs, and the PDFs will save trees. And so no, but I did want to throw out. I had 2, but one is, yeah, how are we doing National Night Out tomorrow? I'm just throwing that out there because I think we've added a whole bunch more neighborhoods. So as much as I love y'all, I might veer off some. I know that we went together some last year and met up, but I think we've added some more neighborhoods. So whatever the complete list is, I think there's some other ones. And if you haven't been to some neighborhoods, it might be nice to venture out to some of those. I think we've added some new downtown neighborhoods and some new East Durham neighborhoods that I didn't even know like were on the list. So I would just say tomorrow for National Night Out. Monica, maybe it's my fault. We're not doing hats and T-shirts. I have an outfit, so I'm good. I just wanted to make sure because if everybody had on a hat and a T-shirt, I was gonna feel weird.
We did not get hats and T-shirts.
All right.
There were a lot
This
of
is last
things
year.
that
We walked in looking like the chiffon quintuplets, and no need for that. So that was the only big one. Tomorrow's National Night Out. We talk a lot about gun violence. I think it's important for folks to see us out in the community. Especially now. I remember a group of us went to the mall after the mall shooting. People need to see that we are not afraid. People need to see that also that we care about the community. And so I do hope to see some of y'all, and hopefully we can work together. Also, I'm just letting my colleagues know there are a series of nonprofits I know that are coming out of COVID and are coming out of COVID just a bit more crippled than what they probably would have been, and not necessarily mismanaged funds. They overburden themselves doing exactly what we're doing, and that's taking care of the community. So at some point, I hope to get with my colleagues and talk about how we can be more supportive of some of our really good nonprofits. So those are my 2 things, and so thank y'all for listening.
And Commissioner Burns and Monica can share with you, we tried to pick new places that we have not visited. They just added themselves this time. So we'll try and hit as many as we can.
And just to add to that, Maceo just finalized the route, so I will be getting with you guys after the meeting, and I'll also be emailing the route out. We'll meet here, and everyone will ride together if you plan on riding as a group. If not, you can take the route and drive separately. But we do have the route and the times that will be there.
That's what I was, perfect. Okay, thank you.
And it'll be great to invite our county manager to come with us too.
Planning on being there, yes.
Great.
I vote we send her in a motorcade. Because there'll be many with our law enforcement.
So I just wanted to, wait a minute, now I got to open my iPad again. I did want to share some more information with the board from the conference very quickly. A few things I wanted to just share. And one is that there is a federal task force that is going, federal task force on mental illness and the courts, and they are going to be coming out with guidance on the treatment of people in detention centers when they're going through withdrawal from substances, alcohol and other substances, and I think that's very important. And I look forward to getting that information when I get it and sharing that. I think that's going to be a best practice, important for us to follow. Second thing is I found out about this Federal Storm Act funding that is for risk mitigation. Is going to be coming out, but our states have to actually apply for it. So Deborah, just wanted to get that on your radar and all of our radar that we're going to need to, and for NCACC next week, the state is the one who has to ask for that money, and then counties can apply for it through the state. Early childhood, what was interesting, and the manager and I were already talking about this, they gave a statistic that nationally only 23% of children ages 0 to 2 have access to child care. It would be interesting for us to see where we are at right now, because we have a benchmark from 2015, but where are we at now with that number? I think it would be important for us to know. Let me see, the 988 system. I wanted to do a session on that. And I think it's going to be really important that we understand how our 988 system is working in our state and how it's going to coordinate with our own 911 and then the safety pilots and our own community paramedicine program. I listen to states that have been preparing for this for years, and they already have like this very robust local system that's happening, which we don't have anything like. For instance, this was in Ohio. They already have had 4,000 calls that they had 87% were resolved over the phone. Then they have a mobile crisis unit that responds. Only 6% of them need a law enforcement response. So there's just a great opportunity with 988, but I think I would really like to understand, because that just rolled out like a soft launch, how that's really happening here. And then the last thing I wanted to share, and I will going to pass something around, but and this is related to the Familiar Faces Initiative. There are counties that have, for 30 years, they have a robust data sharing system. I was drooling listening to Johnson County, Kansas. They have something called MyRC. They also have a Justice Information Management System, but this is information that I want to share more in depth, but basically is a best practice where they can track somebody who is cycling through, and everybody is putting information into the same system to the degree where that person goes to the food pantry 3 times in 1 week, and people are following up with them saying, "Are you okay? Do you need, what's going on? Do you need food right now?" I mean, it's just amazing. But it is really, so much of it is related to having that system and really being able to track people who need help and connecting them. Anyway, I'm excited about what we can do here in our own community. And I'm going to pass around also stuff from the pre-K panel that Commissioner Howerton presented. I picked up something for each commissioner from that, and I'll just pass that around. Sorry, I'm old school.
So Commissioner Jacobs and I probably picked up the same materials. A lot of times she's got some that I didn't get. But what I didn't get, I can find it on the internet, because they put all of their information on the internet as well. So a lot of the information, we even haven't had the opportunity to read through all of the information that we picked up. I'm going to put mine in the office, in our offices back there in Commissioner's office. I do want to share with the commissioners, and we haven't been able to do a press release yet. Deborah's going to be doing a press release. As if I didn't have enough to do, I was just appointed to the board of directors for the National Association of Counties. So what you will have is one of your board members, thank you, one of your board members at the national level that will be talking about things that impact our counties. And part of that responsibility will be when we go to DC, I don't know where I'll be in the number to be at the table, but I'll be at the table. Durham will be represented. Also, I'm excited about that, and I just want to share that. And she's going to be doing a press release, but it's not an easy board to get on. Sometimes God just smiles on you. All I can say, and I'm thankful that they chose me, and I get to represent Durham. So, the other things, what else do we have on the agenda? The commissioners, what was that? Something else on the agenda for?
Well, we had the follow-up on commissioner directives, and I did see where.
Any questions around
Any questions? And General Manager Hager sent, I think she sent out a message with the link to it.
Yeah, the only two things I just wanted to flag were from 2021 was the plastic bag ordinance. So just wanted us not to forget about that. And also, I didn't know where we were. Maybe Attorney Darby I don't know where we were with the conversations. Did we find anything out about the affordable housing for teachers and what we can do locally without having to go through the state?
And yeah, I talked to the school board chair, and she said that she was going to have her attorney get together with you to figure out what they needed to do. That's the last conversation I had with it.
We did that. We contacted Brunswick County, I believe, who had done it another way. We agreed that we could do it that way as well, rather than getting special legislation.
So what do we need to do at this point?
Waiting for her to put the documents together. This is their project. It's their land. I'm getting wait for them to get the project started, or the process started, so I can still get out already.
So do I need to send the chair a message and tell her?
Yeah, if you do that, that might help.
Okay, that she needs to follow up with her attorney to get the papers together so that we can move ahead.
Her attorney will start the process, and we agreed that it can't be done without special legislation. Her attorney will start the process.
Okay, I'll send her an email today. All right, thank you.
I had another one, and it's really quick. It's not for I'm happy you brought it because it's along the same lines. And I don't know if we need to do it or we need to get Registers of Deeds office to do it. Both myself, along with Commissioner Jacobs, probably for about 6 months now, has made a request of the schools. And now I realize we don't necessarily need them to answer this, but I would like to see a list or a portfolio of all the properties that they own that are not currently being utilized. We've asked for that during 2 joint city-county school board meetings, and we've yet to get that document. So whoever in this office, short of me doing a public records request, which would be really sad, as we're working on, these housing initiatives, as we're looking at properties being taken up, downtown, we need to see what we have in our portfolio. So, I make that request of our office and we got it. So I would just love to see what the school board actually has and still owns and what pieces of property are outstanding for them that they're not utilizing. So that's my directive. Now, who's going to do it?
Okay, if there's nothing else, we can adjourn, and
We have a closed session.
we have adjourn this meeting, go to closed session. I don't know what I did with my, it's just too many pieces of paper today. Where is the, okay, closed session today. So the board is requested to go into closed session to establish or to instruct the public body, staff, or negotiating agent concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease, or the amount of compensation and other material terms of an employment contract or proposed employment contract pursuant to GS 148.318.11A5. We need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter, Vice Chair Jacobs, Chair Howerton.
Aye. Passes 4-0. So we got to suspend the minutes? We got to suspend the rules? We don't? Okay. We're going to, so we met in closed session, and I have a motion that we need to approve. The motion is to move, I need to let somebody else read it.
Get to Heidi.
The motion is, I move to authorize staff to enter an opening bid of $100,000 to purchase parcel ID 171593 and to respond appropriately to any upset bid that may be submitted as necessary to secure the property and to authorize the county manager to execute all documents necessary to complete the transaction.
Madam Chair, I do so move.
I need a second.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Roll call.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jacobs,
Aye.
Chair Howerton.
Aye. The motion's been approved 4-0.
May I ask a question just briefly? Did y'all vote to go back in open session?
We don't,
Did we have to?
no.
No, okay, she said we don't.
No? Okay.
We're good.
So if there's no other business, we adjourn.
Need a motion?
Need a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jacobs,
Aye.
Chair Howerton.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.